Still dealing with lingering after effects from his torn quad tendon surgery, Jamal Adams missed his latest game on Monday Night Football and wasn't even in attendance at Lumen Field. Is it time to shut him down for the season? Nick Lee and I'll be breaking it all down in a festive Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our latest Blue Friday edition by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Hope you have a happy holidays with your friends and family. And thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to be breaking down a game plan, keys to victory for the Seahawks in Nashville against the Titans on Christmas Eve. We got our picks to click, game predictions, and much more on a jam-packed Blue Friday episode. Now for your lead story here on our latest installment of Locked On Seahawks. Jamal Adams continues to deal with lingering chronic knee pain as a result of his torn quad tendon injury that cost him most of the 2022 season. And last week, not only was he not active for the Seahawks, he was not in attendance at the stadium at Lumen Field. And Pete Carroll talked about it on his Tuesday morning show, said that it wasn't a big deal, that he didn't need to be there. But Nick, reading between the tea leaves, there's been some more comments that have been made here in the last few days, including Pete Carroll saying that they have considered the possibility of shutting Jamal Adams down for the rest of the season. I think that Mike Holmgren had it right on KJR the other day. It looks to me, and I've been thinking this for more than a week, it looks to me like Pete Carroll is trying to find a soft landing spot here in a situation that is not tenable for the team or the player who, quite frankly, is not playing well when he's been on the field. And if he's not healthy, you have no reason to have him out there right now.
Look, to Pete Carroll, to a fault, loyal, players coach, he does everything he can to protect his players, even if they're having some sort of disagreements or, relationship might be deteriorating behind the door front, behind closed doors. He's going to back his guys. He's going to protect them, that kind of thing. And Jamal Adams falls in that category. I'm not going to hold back a little bit. He ranks, I looked through the Pro Football Focus, 20% of the safeties that have taken at least 20% of the team's defensive snaps. That's 100 safeties in the NFL. Jamal Adams ranks 85th in Pro Football Focus grade. He allows 122 passer rating, and which is among the in the 90s and 80s as well as far as rankings. He's been terrible. I mean, let's not sugarcoat this. He's been terrible this year. Now if they want to paint the picture of covering for it with, health issues, he's not right all the way, that kind of thing, still kind of getting his sea legs under him. I'm not buying that. Obviously it was a grueling rehab, and I'm not going to say that he didn't work hard to try to get back, because he did. But it's concerning. It's absolutely concerning. And for me, I think I'm going to, I want to cut bait. I want to cut bait, and I want to just keep going with what they had, on Monday night. And I think it's,
And, well, we have lost Nick Lee. This is the first time this has happened on Blue Friday. Happy Christmas Eve to all the 12s out there. We lost Nick. And, hey, who knows what's going on behind the scenes? There might be somebody that this is another yikes situation, and we got to make sure that that Nick is not able to completely finish his thought on this. But looking at what Pete Carroll had to say, and Nick was kind of referencing this, Pete Carroll said this on Wednesday before practice. Somebody asked him about the possibility of the Seahawks shutting down Jamal Adams. He said, "We kind of don't talk about that, but it's been something that we have acknowledged, and that's a decision. So far, he's wanted to keep going and driving and see what he can make of it. I just support everything where he's coming from in every way. We'll take it one shot at a time, and we'll figure it out together. So this continues to be a day-to-day thing, and right now we're still waiting for Nick Lee to check back in. Some connection-related issues for him on his computer, but the Seahawks are playing this day-to-day right now, and I don't know if that's necessarily really how the organization is viewing it. I don't think that Pete Carroll's being dishonest here. I think he's working with the player, and if Jamal Adams is fully healthy, the Seahawks want to have him out there. They referenced this on Tuesday with Carroll's statement, we need him against the Titans, but he didn't practice again Wednesday and Thursday. It seems unlikely that he's going to be able to come back and play in this game. And there's clearly frustration. The player wants to be out there, but he's not healthy. He's not playing well when he's on the field. Julian Love was Defensive Player of the Week this week for the Seahawks with 2 interceptions. And we got Nick Lee back on the show. And I was just joking, maybe this is another yikes moment since you were talking about Jamal Adams.
We had a blustery day here in Olympia, Washington, and power kind of flickered, and apparently so did my router. So here we go.
Again, we don't know what's behind that, but
Jamal Adams might be in my backyard. I might need to lock the doors.
As I was just mentioning, though, this is truly a situation where I don't think that Pete Carroll's being dishonest, but I also think that the Seahawks, they are looking at this situation as A, Jamal Adams is not playing well, even when he's on the field. B, he's clearly not right, or at least we're going to say he's not right based on the way that he's performing right now. And Julian Love is the defending NFC Defensive Player of the Week, and he's played outstanding football the last couple of weeks. You can't take him off the field, especially for a player that has been struggling as much as what Jamal Adams has. So I am in the party that it is time to shut him down. Now, what that means for the future with him, it's probably not good for his chances of being back next year, but who knows where the Seahawks truly stand on that. And he did have a very bad injury. So sometimes it takes more than a year to get all the way back from that. I just don't know with the way things are going on right now, though, that this is a tenable situation. And I think the Seahawks, they are internally trying to figure out what they can do to try to move on with as soft of a landing, as Holmgren said, from Jamal Adams as they can this offseason. I think right now that they're dealing with a difficult situation, but Pete Carroll has been through these rigors before.
Right. And it's one thing to, not be playing well and try to recover from the injury, that thing, but he's also just not done himself any favors with some of the nonsense on social media, some of the way that he's talked to reporters, to him being MIA on the sidelines while Devin Witherspoon's there cheering on his team. Geno Smith is there, not that he was inactive, but he was actively rooting for Drew Lock, and that was awesome to see. I think at this point, unfortunately, just with all that's going on, bad play along with it. At the end of the year, I think it's addition by subtraction. You saw that in the Eagles game. Him and I'm not saying Tariq Woolen falls in that category. I think Tariq Woolen has a very bright future, but you saw that change up in the secondary against Philadelphia just work wonders and kind of flustered the Eagles a little bit. Julian Love having perhaps the game of his life ahead of the birth of their child and everything like that. So just a magical week for him. And I think it was addition by subtraction from Jamal Adams in that game. And I think moving forward, you can save about $6 million against the cap going into 2024. And like I've been saying online, cut him and put that in the jar of the re-sign Leonard Williams fund.
Yeah, you can re-sign one player that you got from a New York team and move on from the other. And I don't know that it's necessarily as easy as that. It is a lot of dead cap money that you're going to be eating to make that move. But if you don't make that move by a certain point, this money becomes guaranteed for Jamal Adams. And I don't think the Seahawks will end up in that position. So we'll talk about that once we get to the offseason. But it feels like that team right now is trying to slowly and it is positive way as possible start moving that direction. And Pete Carroll wants the best team he could have out there. They're in the middle of a playoff race right now. That's not a debate. This is a much better team with Julian Love on the football field. So we'll see what happens. It doesn't look like Jamal Adams is going to be available this week. And who knows if he plays again for the Seahawks this season with all the things that are going on behind the scenes. Up next, we are going to put together a game plan. The Seahawks heading to Nashville to face the Titans on Christmas Eve. We'll have keys to victory on offense, defense, and maybe a bit of Christmas-related lingo sprinkled in there as well. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Take my word for it. You're not battling against a bunch of other players, pros and sharks. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. It's a ton of fun. And it's really simple to play. Prize Picks, I can make my picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. And they've added combo leagues with basketball and football, which is my favorite thing to do on Prize Picks. For example, I can have Steph Curry and Tyler Lockett at 12.5 three-pointers plus receptions. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you've got a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't come back in the second, that player is going to be rebooted. Prize Picks offers the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance program. Prize Picks is an absolute blast each week, and it's an easy way to enjoy daily fantasy without any hassle and land quick winnings. Go to prizepicks.com right now, /LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com /LockedOnNFL. And use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, and happy holidays to you and your loved ones. May it a great one. And hopefully the Seahawks will have a victory to make it even better for you. And speaking of a Seahawks victory in Nashville, it's going to be Christmas Eve. It's going to be a festive environment. And even though the Titans have been eliminated, they've got some diehard fans in Nashville. So I still expect, especially with it being a holiday game, that there's going to be plenty of noise, and this is going to be a hostile road environment for the Seahawks to deal with from an offensive perspective. And I talked about this in a couple episodes earlier this week. It does feel like on paper, and this can be dangerous when you're talking about on paper, but it feels like the Seahawks have a ton of major advantages on the offensive side of the football, especially with the Titans likely to be missing their best defensive player for this game, Jeffrey Simmons, dealing with a knee injury. Nick, looking at this game from a Seahawks perspective and getting your game plan, your coaching cap on, what's the first thing that absolutely has to happen for the Seahawks to ensure they get this win on Christmas Eve in Nashville?
Well, hopefully some Seahawks fans also, sought a slightly warmer environment in Nashville and make the trip as well to Christmas Eve and fill that stadium up. But for me, much like my wife's peanut butter peppermint cookies, it is just a winning formula to run for 100 yards. Those are delicious, and I can smell them baking downstairs, and it's just not fair. It's a winning formula to dash through the defense of the Titans for 100 yards. Hopefully, I don't think you'll be dashing through the snow and dash in Nashville, but run for 100 yards is turning into just one of those benchmarks for the Seahawks this year. 6-0. Now the Seahawks are 6-0, and when you're 6-0, when you do X, that X is now a thing. And running for 100 yards for the Seahawks is a thing. And you saw it. How could you deny that after seeing how the Seahawks came out after a very lackluster first half against the Eagles, and then just clearly made a conscious decision out of halftime? We are going to just run the ball right at him, around him, at him, whatever, with Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet. And I think it was 16 touches total for the running backs in the second half, 7 touches between the two running backs on that 9-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to open the half. That just really set the tone for how that game would unfold later on. You cannot deny the effect, just not only in the numbers, but just emotionally, mentally, how having a run game like that could just change your team.
Yeah, and you look at the last 2 weeks, this Titans defense was one of the best run defenses in football, and they're still only giving up 3.9 yards per attempt this year, which is one of the best marks in the league. But they have really struggled the last couple of weeks. They lost Simmons to an injury. They've had a few other changes up front that have negatively impacted 100 yards and 148 yards on the ground in consecutive weeks to the Dolphins and the Texans. So this is a team that's very much in recent games been struggling to defend the run. They've also struggled, and this has been more of an all-season issue, but giving up explosives in the passing game. They've had some injuries at the quarterback position. Christian Fulton, one of their outside quarterback starters, he's on injured reserve and won't play in this football game, and that sets up favorably. If you can get that run game going, I think you've absolutely got to pack some play action punch this holiday season. You have got to get those downfield throws with the play action game against a defense that has given up 47 explosive pass plays of 20 yards or more. That's in the top 10 in the NFL. It's a secondary that's been suspect most of the season, even more so since they traded Kevin Byard to the Eagles. They've got a new safety in there for him. This is a secondary that is ripe to give up big plays. I think they needed at least 3 or more 20-plus yard passes off of play fakes in this football game. Really dish out that play action punch, and it gives the Seahawks a chance to potentially make this game not a laugher, but make it that it's a comfortable win, something we haven't seen for a while for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and Geno Smith, third in the NFL in completion percentage on play action. We've talked about this a lot. He's third in Pro Football Focus's big time throws via PFF on play action passes. Clearly, a play action pass offense that flourishes, and taking those deep shots, I think is a huge part of that as well. And then for me, I was surprised, and I always kind of go through your typical stats, where they rank in rushing yards per game allowed, passing yards, and all that stuff. Then I go down to third downs and red zone. And then I had to do a double take that the Titans are the number one red zone defense currently as far as percentages on allowing touchdowns. Now, they've also allowed, I think, the fourth most red zone trips. So there's some disparity there, but I had a hard time kind of pinpointing what exactly has made them like the number one red zone defense right now. But on the flip side as well, sustaining drives and getting touchdowns in the red zone too, I would say in the red zone would be my sweet spot to get two red zone touchdowns, sustain those drives, because the Titans are 29th in time of possession per drive allowed, or time per drive allowed, and 30th in plays per drive allowed. So yes, they have decent run defense numbers, but they have allowed sustained drives, and they have good, obviously, red zone touchdown allowed numbers right now, but they've allowed those sustained drives. And if you get enough of those with the Seahawks, with the talent they have on offense, that they're going to get points. And I think that's going to be where you can kind of separate yourself as an offense, is getting into the red zone, turning 3 into 7, and just sustaining those drives, because the Titans have really been generous on that front on defense.
Flipping the script over to the defensive side of the ball, this has kind of been a theme all week now. It sounds like Geno Smith's in good shape to start this team for the Seahawks. So I don't think there's any quarterback questions for Seattle. But Tennessee, Will Levis has not practiced yet this week. From what I'm hearing, he's not going to practice this week. He's not playing. And that means it's Ryan Tannehill season. And that could be a kind of dangerous thing for the Seahawks, because you're talking about a veteran quarterback that has a track record. He took this team to an AFC title game a few years back. He has talent. He is a seasoned vet. He's seen everything. And oh, by the way, he still thinks he can start for somebody. So how do you show you can do that? Go out and play really well in an audition game going towards free agency. And there may be some quarterback needy teams that end up taking a flyer on him this offseason. So that can be dangerous. But at the same time, this is not the Ryan Tannehill from 3 or 4 years ago in terms of mobility. He still can move some, but he is not the athlete that he used to be. He's had some injury issues. This boils down to the pass rush, Nick. And sticking with our Christmas theme, you've got to deck the Tannehills in this game. You need to get that veteran QB to the ground, give him a rude holiday return. I think 4+ sacks. That's the number I'm looking at, because this is not a good offensive line for the Tennessee Titans. What was once a strength for this football team when they were making deep playoff runs, they've lost Taylor Lewan. Nate Davis left in free agency. That's ended up being a huge loss. Peter Skoronski, I think, is going to be a good player, but he's still a rookie that moved inside after being a tackle at Northwestern. They've had moving doors at a couple of the other positions. This offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL. Seattle has got to take advantage of that. Turn up the heat on Ryan Tannehill, who has been vulnerable to quarterback hits and sacks with his mobility not being the same. Get after the QB. I think that is recipe number one here to really stop this Titans offense that hasn't been great or even good most of this season.
Yeah, Pro Football Focus ranks their offensive line 31st right now. They're just not doing great. They against the Texans last week in kind of a weird overtime game. They have of all the teams that played in Week 15, the third worst pass blocking efficiency. So they're really struggling. And the Titans have actually allowed 4+ sacks in 7 games this year and are 1-6. Understandably, usually that's a losing formula if your quarterback's getting sacked 4+ times. So I think that's a good first step there on defense. And then, of course, we can't get too far into this, Corbin, talking about the Titans offense without mentioning him, the king himself, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, in my opinion, the wear is just showing a little bit on the treads. He's having his worst yards per carry. Now, of course, the offensive line is a little bit to do with that as well. He's still getting decent yards after contact, missed tackles forced, but he's having an underwhelming season by his lofty standards. And yes, again, that could be a lot of the offensive line, but holding him to 80 yards or less would be great. Rushing yards would be 80 or less rushing yards would be great, because the Titans are actually 2-7 when he gets less than 80 rushing yards this year, 2-5 when he gets less than 80 scrimmage yards, because they can still feature him in the pass game. So keeping him bottled up, you saw how the Texans did it. He has, Corbin, I was looking in the last 2 games, 33 carries for 43 yards. That's just an indictment and a half on his offensive line.
Yeah, watching Titans games, I don't think that Derrick Henry has lost much of a step based on what I've seen. When he's had a little bit of blocking, he has still been the tractor Cito that we have known to love. Even in the Pacific Northwest, he's one of my favorite players I've ever watched, just because he's one of those Madden creative player freaks at 265 pounds running the way he does. But I think he is still a very formidable back. And don't forget about Tajay Spears, the backup, either. He is an electric rookie, much different style player. That could be a guy that gives you some fits in this game if you're the Seahawks, because he also can do a lot of damage as a receiver. And my last key real quick, get out the gift wrapping paper. You need to have tight coverage on Nuke Hopkins. Don't let him beat you. Force the rest of the Titans receivers to do damage, because they've basically been doing a by committee thing with their second and third receiver, because I don't know if they even have a number 2 receiver on this team. Their tight ends have been underwhelming. Force the rest of the supporting cast to win this football game in the passing game for the Titans. Do not let Hopkins dish out a nuke on your defense. Just don't let it happen. Let the veteran have his handful of catches, but no big plays down the field. Force other guys to beat you. And I think that's a really good formula for the Seahawks to win a game that, quite frankly, they have the talent advantage. Now you just got to go out and you got to do your business. You got to take care of business. Don't just coast through this game. Go out and make a statement. One of the ways you can do that is limiting their best receiver by a landslide and trying to force the rest of this underwhelming receiving core to beat you in the passing game. Up next, we're going to look at picks to click. We've got our game predictions and much more here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Why root for your team on an empty stomach? That is a game day travesty that ensures you won't be cheering at your very best. So make sure to order on DoorDash and save on football watch party favorites. Right now, you can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Downloading the DoorDash app and entering the code LOCK23. When I'm kicking back and watching the game during the holidays with friends and family, I got to make sure to have my Jet City Pizza, my favorite gluten-free pizza place in the Seattle region. And don't forget the 2-liter root beer and cinnamon sticks for the rest of the party. DoorDash makes this process so easy. I can be lazy. I don't have to leave the comfort of my couch for delicious, great-tasting food before and after kickoff. It's so simple. I've ordered Jet City to the point. Their managers know me by name. If you're ready to satisfy your taste buds on game day this holiday season, quench those cravings with your favorite local restaurants via DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Downloading the DoorDash app and entering the code LOCK23. Subject to change. Terms apply. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show here, leading up to Christmas, by my co-host, Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, and a happy holidays to you and your loved ones. The Seahawks continuing their run to the playoffs. It's going to be a little trickier now with the Rams winning on Thursday night. They're now 8-7. The Rams obviously have the tiebreaker, but the Seahawks, they still, for the most part, control their destiny. Just win out, and you have a good chance to make the playoffs. So, Nick, let's talk picks to click. The guys that we think need to have a big game or expect to have a big game against the Titans to help the Seahawks get back above the 500 mark. Who is your pick to click on the offensive side of the ball in Nashville?
Well, I haven't looked it up, but I think this is the one I've picked the most this year. And he is just riding a magical sleigh ride of momentum after that game-winning catch, his second game-winning catch in the final minute of a game this year. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the rookie. He's looking at what Puka Nacua did on Thursday nights and saying, hey, this rookie receiver's got a little something too. And I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba could have perhaps his best statistical day. 8 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown is what I have here as a just kind of a fun guess. But just really, he's got that momentum. He's really turned a corner ever since the early bye. He's been way more featured in the offense after a very, very slow start. He's going to be pushing for probably, I would say, close to 700 something yards by the end of the year at this pace. So I expect a pretty big game from him, especially with some of the issues the Titans have had in the secondary and just the momentum. I mean, just the juice that the Seahawks got. I think that word has been thrown around a lot this week by Pete Carroll, by everybody. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, I was lucky enough to be there close to the Scott Van Pelt desk as Jackson Smith-Njigba was there with Scott Van Pelt, and just the energy. The Seahawks fans love this kid, and that momentum I could see pouring into Christmas Eve.
You go with the rookie. I'm going with the Grizzly veteran, Tyler Lockett. It's been kind of a disappointing season by his standards. He's not on pace for 1,000 yards. In fact, he's going to be hard-pressed right now to get above 900 with the way that things have gone. But it just feels like that breakout game for this season is coming. And there have been some flashes where we've seen Tyler Lockett. He's dropped some passes that we don't normally see him drop. But I look at this Titans team, and Roger McCreary is probably their best quarterback in the slot, but he has had some issues with shifty, quick, savvy route runners out of the slot, and Tyler Lockett checked off all those boxes. I think they're going to use Lockett a fair amount out of the slot this game. And he's due for a double-digit catch game. He's due for a 100-yard game, and he's definitely due for a visit in the end zone. I think with Geno Smith back out there, that he is going to have one of the best, if not the best game he has had this season against a secondary that has been ripe for big plays. So you go with the rook. I'm going to go with the veteran here, and I'm going to make the safe play. Now, on defense, I'm going to go with a guy that I think absolutely needs to be in the discussion to make the Pro Bowl roster. He has been fantastic in the middle, and there was questions about how much he had left after a somewhat down year in Green Bay last year. But I look at that offensive line for the Titans. You mentioned it. PFF ranks them 31st. Jaron Reed, that interior offensive line. Peter Skoronski's been okay as a rookie, but that entire interior offensive line has struggled in pass protection this year. I think Jaron Reed is going to go off. I've got 4 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and I think he's going to force a fumble. Ryan Tannehill has been fairly giving when it comes to coughing up the football over the years. I think Jaron Reed's going to get to him and knock the football out to force a turnover for the Seahawks. So I think this is going to be a big game for Jay Reed in Nashville.
I like that. I think I'm thinking similarly against, praying against the offensive line. Boye Mafe hasn't had a sack since Veterans Day weekend. We have brined and roasted the turkey for Thanksgiving. We've put up the Christmas decorations, baked the cookies, went Christmas shopping, all since Mafe had his last sack. And I think it's time. It's time for, he had that record-setting pace to start the year. It's time. It's a ripe situation. He got to roast that offensive line like chestnuts on an open fire, Corbin. And I think Jaron Reed and Boye Mafe can play off each other there and really open up things against a really suspect offensive line.
All right, it's prediction time. We're almost to Christmas Eve. The Seahawks are going to be looking to usher in the holiday with a victory. Are they going to get it done, though, Nick? I know there's plenty of skepticism out there about this football team, even after what happened on Monday night. And Mike Vrabel coach teams, you can't count on them not showing up. They are still going to play hard because of what their coach's mindset is. They're going to be physical. They're going to be tough. How concerned are you about this football game?
Well, for those who think this is going to be some sort of easy win for the Seahawks, one, when did you start being a Seahawks fan? Because that's never a thing. And then 2, if you watch what the Titans do, that's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be that easy. although no Will Levis, I think he brings a different energy to that franchise. I mean, just young, fresh, athletic. It just seems to have that energy, that fire. Lost season kind of now, but yeah, Mike Vrabel is not going to let that happen. The Seahawks got the swagger back a little bit. Their playoff hopes are very much alive. It's Christmas weekend, and they're smacking the playoff hunt. I mean, what else could you want? But I do worry a little bit, Corbin, about a possible Monday Night Football hangover, quick turnaround, road game after that kind of physical matchup against the 40 or the Eagles. I'm going to go iron sharpens iron with this last gauntlet. I'm going Seahawks going to win, pull it out late. I think it's close. I think there's a little hangover, but I think the Seahawks get it done and gift the Seahawks fans a nice win on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and those that are watching on YouTube, you can see that Nick is freezing again, but that may be because of the weather. It could be because, as we mentioned earlier, the yikes situation. But we lost Nick. The weather is not so delightful right now in the Pacific Northwest. As far as my prediction goes, I think this game is a little bit more comfortable than what Nick has. I think 31-20. I don't think it's a blowout. I think the Titans are too well coached. I think this is a disciplined football team that's going to be ready to play. Derrick Henry still scares me, even with that offensive line he's got in front of him. But I think the Seahawks just have too many weapons on the outside for a secondary that's been suspect. I expect them to be able to run the ball without Jeffrey Simmons being healthy. I just think this is a game where the Seahawks offense is able to get the job done. I think the defense is going to be able to take care of business on enough possessions to win this football game. So by Seattle standards, an 11-point win, pretty comfortable. I think they get to 8-7, not taking this Tennessee Titans team lightly by any means. As I've mentioned, I have great respect for them. I just think with the injuries and some of the player personnel changes that they have had, I just think the Seahawks coming off this game on Monday night, that they are positioned to make a run here late, and I don't think they're going to let the Titans stand in their way. So I've got the Seahawks getting that nice early Christmas gift for the 12s with a 31-20 victory. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick on X at NickLee51. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Don't forget, we'll have our post-game show. I'll be joined by Rob Rang a couple hours after the final whistle in Nashville on Christmas Eve. Enjoy your holiday weekend, and thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.